Good morning to all you people out there. It's actually afternoon in Portugal. But Daniel, thanks for saying good morning. It's nice to have you. I would imagine that you are on the west coast somewhere of America or maybe even New York. It's lovely to see you guys. Maeve Crawford in the chat from the UK, I'd imagine. It's lovely to know that you think it's worth the move. And yes, it is nice and warm. I think it was like 18 degrees. I was interviewing somebody today in, where was it? Down in the west today on the podcast, and it was 18 degrees down in Lagos. But I'm just going to yak on a little bit here for now while we wait for people to filter in, and then we're going to get going. So, hi, Chad. Thanks for coming all the way from Portland. So you've been considering Portugal since 2017. That's a long time. That's 8 years. So I'm glad you got some curiosities there. We'll note those and get into that. Lou, hi. Lou Miller, thanks for being here. It's a pleasure for us to do this. And we want to try and just share our own experiences today. So obviously the title of this video or this webinar is Portugal Still Worth the Move? And we just want to sit back, Nick and I, and have a little fireside chat and tell you what our opinion is. And we're going to go through the lens. Basically, there's 4 different items that we're going to speak about. One is the real cost of living situation in Portugal. Number 2 is what's actually changing with visas and immigration policies, because that's been hot on everybody's topic lists in the last month or 2 months or even 6 months, I guess. The third is quality of life now versus 5 years ago. And the 4th one is who does Portugal still make sense for and who might want to look elsewhere. So I'm Nick Robinson. Nicholas Smith is over there. Nick's been living here for 14 years. He joined Algarve Addicts in 2023, and it's been a fantastic addition. So thank you very much for being my partner in crime, Nick. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on your channel.
That's our channel, man. It's our channel. And,
just a quick shout out. Sorry, I just see in the chat, just a quick shout out to Jan and David, who I've met and worked with, over for a while now. Jan, sorry, I haven't come back to your email, but you're here and well done on getting here. It's been a bit crazy the last 24 hours, but hey, we're here. So yeah, as Nick said, we want this bit of a, there's a lot of stuff out there at the moment. There's a lot of videos. I feel like it's a bit of one of these sort of trends of Portugal bashing and, it's not worth the move. It's not worth this. It's that. And some of the reasons are founded. There are some things, topics we'll cover off that the Portugal government sometimes doesn't help itself. But I think there's a larger picture to that in many ways that we'll sort of cover off. But the sort of main topics that we want to cover off of in this little webinar is 1, the real cost of living situation in Portugal. 2, what's actually changing with the visas and immigration policies. 3, the quality of life now versus 5 years ago. And 4, who Portugal still makes sense for. Now, I'm going to chuck in a few stats to here, but this whole thing is really framed around my thoughts, my opinion, and Nick, will be interjecting and adding his.
Only when you tell me to.
I only want to tell. Go on, Nick, start. No, this is not, and this is no way this is definitely not a sales thing. This is, look, I'm just going to give you my 2 pieces in 2 bits worth. And look, let's start with framing something here. As Nick said, I've been here for 14 years. I'm kind of like the worst Algarve Addicts story because I chased a girl here in Portugal, having met her on a holiday, and it just so happened at the time I'd started my business and I was able to work from here and kind of do what everybody did post COVID, a long time before COVID hit. I had no, but so my point there being, I didn't have any plans. I didn't think about moving to Portugal. I didn't, set myself up with a load of research to move. I kind of just did it. And yes, this was a pre-Brexit scenario. My life was simple in that sense. I could come and go. I was a UK taxpayer for 10 years, living in Portugal, traveling backwards and forwards. Life, back then was slightly different for me as a UK citizen, in being able to move and not having those barriers. So, that's my framework, right? That's my, as I say, I didn't come in under here with any intention for becoming a Portuguese citizen. I didn't plan to, as I say, to move here and earn money here and all that kind of stuff. I thought, well, hey, I'm earning money in the UK. I'll pay whatever I have to in the UK. I will not lean on the Portuguese system and services. And yeah, moved the dial on 14 years. I've now got 2 kids here. I live here permanently. I earn my money in euros. I'm a Portuguese taxpayer, and kind of could have been trapped here by Brexit, but let's look at it. I see it as a positive. So, the cost of living. The topic one here is the real cost of living here in Portugal. Has this changed in the 14 years I've been here? I mean, there's a simple answer: yes. Inflation takes care of that, like it does. When we're looking at some stats for Portugal, 2025 inflation rate's about 2.2%. Benchmarking that against the US was about 2.7. The UK is about 3.4, and the whole Eurozone's about 2.1. The forecast for the next couple of years is for that to drop. Now, look, I'm not an economist. I'll be honest with you, I'm terrible at my attention to detail on when it comes to my day-to-day living. I just and my costs and looking after that. But my wife is much better than I am and takes care of all those items. But in reality, right, prices have moved on. And they will do, and they would have grown, over this period of time. What I think has made situational stuff, certain aspects, worse is the war in the Ukraine. We had a big rise, when that happened because of gas prices and oil prices being affected dramatically. Now, at the time I was working for a company who were building a project, and it was amazing how the prices shifted in production of steel, cement, etc., all going back to the raw costs of materials and processing them.
Nick, they were building what kind of project were they building?
Yeah, apartment
project,
project in Faro.
Complex.
And
yeah.
that was a real life effect on that. And of course that's going to knock on to everybody across different things, across different sectors, whether they're manufacturing products to be sold in Leroy Merlin, which is our department store, and all the way through. What I found, and again, this is a Nickism rather than sort of a fact, but I'd like to think it is fact, that people jumped on the bandwagon. Over that time, I saw restaurants, the tourist restaurants raising their prices quite dramatically. I'm not going to name names, but, I saw prices of steaks go from 30 euros to 50 euros. And I was like, guys, this is insane. Like, what are you doing? Like,
well, can I just jump in there?
This is the Ukraine.
Yeah, can I just jump in there? Sorry, Nick. It's basically when I was 20 years ago, I was living in Cavuera, and I remember a steak was quite expensive. It was 12 euros. And now 20 years later, if it's 25 euros, that's sort of getting expensive in my mind. It's easing up to 30 euros. So we used to be able to go out to eat for 2 of us for 30, 35 euros at a regular restaurant. Now it's closer to 60. So it's almost doubled. And so, yeah, I mean, the reason I've stayed away in my videos from talking about cost of living is because it's so highly variable. And it depends how you can find really, really cheap deals still. If you go a little bit back from the coast and you do all that, but you can also live super, super high on the hog. But anyway, I'm taking your
No,
I
agree. You've got to jump to another point, that I was going to look to make is to talk about, there's what you see in the Algarve. So we are, please, let's reframe this. We're not talking about Portugal as a whole in the sense that we know at the Algarve. We live in the Algarve. We work in the Algarve. This is our market. This market has always been slightly different in that you have such a large focus on the tourism industry, and therefore what happens on the coast is not representative of the rest of the Algarve. So, and what I mean, you can go and buy a coffee in a beachside restaurant for 4 euros, 5 euros. They're making you pay for the value of the, for the view. If they can jack it up because of, market forces behind the scenes, the tourist spend is always very different to the realism. When you're here, you kind of accept it. You've got your budget and away you go. Or those that don't have the budget, they just come in and blow it. So, you consciously, as an Algarvian resident, need to make the decisions about where you're going to go. It's about looking for the cheaper option. The cheaper option exists. I live very close to the beach, right? I have all the expensive stuff on my doorstep if I want it. But within a 6-minute car ride and on the way to our office, I can stop in a pastaria and buy a coffee and a sandwich, which, excuse my pronunciation here, but, for like €2. So, drop the mic, walk out. That's not expensive in any form of global session. London, you're not getting change from a tenner for a Pret sandwich. That might not mean anything to anybody who's not been to the UK, but you're just not. And I'm sure the stateside you're seeing a huge amount, a huge difference in cost for coffee and a sandwich there. So you then still got this massive tradition in Portugal of the sort of, I suppose, the socialist hangover of the prato de dia, the dish of the day. So at lunchtimes, you can go to the, a pastaria, or a small restaurant, very Portuguese focused, and have a meal for between €7 and €9, cooked for you. It's hearty. Most people have to take a takeaway because it's too big. Like, tell me where else you can do that.
It's amazing. I love the prato de dia because it includes like a starter, a main course, a dessert, a coffee, and a glass of wine or a beer generally. And I remember arriving in Carença, which is a little village just north of Lourdes, about sort of 15, 18 years ago, and having that for €6. And everybody was really happy. There used to be like a government, I don't know how you say it, but it was like a tax break. And you'd have to pay your employees €5 a day just for lunch. And that would cover lunch like that in a restaurant, because no Portuguese person is going to bring sandwiches to work. You have to go out to a restaurant and enjoy. And now I see, I know in where is it? Paderna. I went the other day. There's a place for doing prato de dia, with all those things included, and that is maybe 12, €13 per person now. So obviously the times have changed and it's got a little bit more expensive, but price of inflation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the raw cost, but in general, it's still cheap. When you're comparing it to other restaurants, a main dish at a beachside restaurant is going to set you back 25, €30. So it's, you can go and eat very well, cheaply here. And the further you go away, the cheaper, in essence, the cheaper it becomes. It becomes more local. So if you want that, hunt the local spots, find it. It's about looking up, going after it. It's not the easy stuff, and the expensive stuff's going to land on your doorstep because that's the most advertised and marketed. So go and find it.
Let's not forget that lunch we had on an island, one of the islands, the Kulatra, I think it was Farol Island. Nick and I went there for lunch about a couple of months ago, and it was €160 for two of us. It was fantastic food, but that was a lot.
Again, an island, they've got to get stuff there. There's obviously the tourist trap element of it, but visually, yeah, it was very Portuguese. So you could kind of be lured into it. So, have a look at it, do your research. Fish is generally, although it's unbelievable here, it can be quite expensive in certain places. So, that's just something to look at. I suppose the big one is house prices, both to purchase and rent. Tackling rentals first. We're a bit of a weird anomaly here. It's really hard to tell whether prices have kind of gone up, because they've always been artificially high. Why? Because in the region is set up for tourism, as I've said, and therefore the majority of homeowners want to capitalize, who are renting them out, want to capitalize on that 10-week short-term whether that's via Airbnb or through agents that do it, because that's the highest yielding with lowest impact on the property. It's 10 weeks, 12 weeks of the year, and kind of away you go. I've got friends who've got an Airbnb, in Faro, and their thing is let all year round. So they're not even seasonal in that sense. They're just getting those 10 weeks. They are all the time. And because of that, that people have this sort of warped view of, hey, the tourist money, I don't want to miss out on that, and therefore if I long term rent it, I need their values to be up there. But having said that, it all comes down to expectation, on what you want, what you're looking for, and what you're willing to to sort of move on. I've been very lucky since I've been here, as I walked in to my now wife's world, and therefore a network of people. When in the early days we were renting, we always rented from people we knew, and they would prefer to have given us a lower rent for to be able to to do that. And that was what, 14 years ago. For a 2-bedroom place, I was paying €600 a month. um Now that same place, if it's non-friends, could be 1,000 to 1,200 probably. So on that note, yes, it's gone big, but my point is, you may artificially have to pay a higher level to get in the sense of what's commercially on the market. But as you build your network, you find people who've got their own investment properties, who've got their own things, you make friends with Portuguese people and everyone else. There's always a deal to be had. So there's the commercial reality, and then there's the, hey, what does life actually bring me on the ground? So it's never been cheap. We're very different to the Porto market and the Lisbon market, that has seen crazy growth in property prices and interest, and therefore, as property prices go up, yield expectation goes up, and people's rents go up. And then obviously purchase pricing at higher levels means the amount of money you are either wanting back or paying in mortgage is higher as well. We're not like
Yep.
that. As I say, we are not a long-term rental market kind of solid foundation. We have it, we find things, we do it, but it's sometimes it's a little bit all over the place. So what I mean is, if you've got a budget of 1,000, we can find you something. If you've got a budget of 700, we can find you something. It just becomes perhaps not exactly what you want. So if you're wanting a 4-bedroom house for €1,000, it's not going to happen unless you know someone who desperately wants someone safe and a safe pair of hands in there. But do not be put off on that. So flipping to housing and buying, yeah, look, I mean, we've seen a crazy amount of growth, here over the last, well, I suppose 14 years that I've been here. It's kind of crazy. I wish I'd had a load of money before to have invested, and we'll be cleaning up at the moment. But like, you just take some stats from October 24 to 25. We've seen a 9.3% jump in comparable prices. This is national, so it gives you a good steer of where it's going, because that obviously includes the less popular places. We, again, here now in 2025, again nationally, we are about 17% up year on year already, and about 15% in transactional volume. It just shows the Portuguese housing market is one of the fastest growing, in Europe. So my point, yes, look, the cost of buying, cost of entering the market has become high, but since 2008, we really they haven't had a decrease. It's been sort of constant growth in the last few years, even post the dramatic changes of golden visa and the change in taxes has not put people off. We constantly have a low supply and a high demand. Whether that's from our friends across the pond, because of Trump coming to power and again and making people move, to the Brexiteers who are the pre-Brexit, the pre and post Brexiteers, whether it's the current UK political scene, whether it's French taxation that drove people to Portugal. There seems to always be a reason for the market to sustain itself. Even with the interest rates that were coming around, and when the whole thing changed, even now you look at it, you're paying something like 6% in the US. We're paying on our mortgage interest rates probably about 2.5 to 2.9, on good deals. Obviously, if you've got questionable income sources, etc., you may be quoted higher, or your age is different in the profile, etc. So it is obviously circumstantial, but gross level, those levels. So we're still way more attractive and cheaper than both the UK market and the US market for cost of money. So when looking at it, and I try to look at it from that investment perspective. Yes, it is not as cheap as it was. Sign of the times, it has moved on, but it's still producing really good results year on year for growth. So if you are coming here the next 5 years, and if it does continue at these rates, you're going to see a 50% growth. Now, is that going to happen? Who knows? Is there something that's going to change it? Again, if I knew, I'd be, if I had the almanac, I'd be laughing. But history is showing that it has grown and has changed and is continuing that way, because we just don't have mass market builders flooding the market with property. And the demand is picked up from all over. Whether that be Europeans, Americans, Canadians, South Africans, we've represented all in this marketplace.
Just a quick question, Nick. I mean, you probably answered this already, but Catherine Collins asked, how connected are you both with housing costs from a rental or purchasing standpoint? Meaning, do you connect regularly with real estate contacts, or is your perspective more from being a resident? I think you've kind of answered that. But
yeah. I mean, look, we are full caveat. If you don't, if you don't know us, we have our own agency here, and we represent buyers, and buyers in the sense of rental and purchase. So I feel like we're very, very on point with the clients that are buying. We still see a lot of, so a lot of people still try to overinflate the value of their properties. I'll give you a live example on a deal we've just closed on. It was, the price we ended up paying for it was 35% lower than what it was marketed on 2 years ago. It sat on the market, for that amount of time. It was a higher value property, in the millions. And in our negotiations, we negotiated just over 15% decrease in that price. Where we've bought it, I feel is a good level. And our aim and our game is to do that, but that is regardless of whether you're using an agent, us, or anyone else. My advice is always don't get blown away by emotion. Emotion in any market means that you're going to end up paying probably the asking price or something close to it. If you can divorce yourself from that, then and you've got time, then play the game, because we see a lot of success, and therefore you could sort of mitigate any overpaying / even get that deal as it's starting to change, and maybe the market might be correcting. But if you're getting it way under asking, then hopefully you're going to be getting it at a good value.
excellent. So yeah, our perspective is definitely more from more than just being a resident. We operate in real estate every day. And Hassan asked, so no talk of a property bubble yet. I mean, we were talking about that. We weren't talking about that, but people were talking about that 2 years ago. So it's very difficult to predict.
Well, exactly. I mean, with any growth sector, there's growth in any market. There's always going to be, AI, right? Everyone's talking about, is that a bubble? Same thing. We are in a continual growth, cycle. So at some point, right, it has to either slow down or burst. But when you look at it, we're not in a marketplace. We're not reliant on one type of owner. It's not just Portuguese citizens who can't pay their mortgages. We're a complete mixed blend of, retirees who are mortgage free and buying cash. We are, whether that's, people moving with it as holiday homeowners. It's kind of a complete smorgasbord of people and not one single type. So, I thought it was going to happen when the interest rates, really rose. But we didn't get hit that hard. And I think, I'll give you a live example. I say this tongue in cheek. It hurt at the time, but my mortgage went from 750 euros to 1,100 euros. I was lucky. I was able to cope with it. And it's now retraced itself back. But we didn't get to the dizzy heights of 6%. If it got to 6%, things may have been very different. so we survived a bit of a bit there. So yeah, is it a bubble? Again, who knows? But we've had such good consistent growth, over the years that history says something's got to happen, but when and how and what, I personally can't see. But that's not advice. It just is what is me. It's just me look trying to look for the negative, because that's kind of what I do.
Okay, Nick, here's another interesting question from David Hogan. He says, how much of the property price growth over the last 10 years do you think is driven by tax incentives like NHR, TISR, etc.? And what if that factor was taken out of the equation?
Interesting. I mean, look, ultimately, right, 2007/8 was, Europe's response to the crash when Portugal was in essence on its knees, as Greece was, as Italy was to allow these countries to put these incredible sort of attractive packages together. So yeah, like I think it was 6.4 billion that came, that came through property purchasing, up until the point that the golden visa for that type ended. I think it did have a lot to do with it. In terms of, promoting that growth and that change. The taxation for sure as well. So I think, but having said that, we're now 2 years out of it, give or take. Tisserie is not the same as NHR. It's not as easy. It's not as, it is as attractive to a certain level, but it's just not as powerful.
It's difficult to get, isn't it? It's much
yeah,
more.
but as I say, as these things dropped away, we as a company thought, oh my God, when these things end, suddenly the demand's going to change. And in reality, it hasn't. We're still, because of other effects like polarizing opinions here, obviously, but Donald Trump coming into power has pushed people to make decisions faster to move here. He's not pushing everybody to move here, but he is a reason. And, we are, still a relatively small place. We're 10 million citizens. We're give or take 600,000 in the Algarve, depending on which bit of data you read. So we're still a small place. So it's we this whole thing maintain. When you lose one or two really sexy schemes, people, there's the demand and people on the ground, and I suppose a point we're going to segue to later on is, this country is still beautiful, and you want to be here because of the weather, the people, the food, being out on the beach, that type of life, that quality of life is, these things change, but they don't move. They stay the same, and people still come for that reason.
Okay, another question from Robert Akins. Let me know if you want to take these questions at the end, Nick, or do you want to?
No, I think if they're contextual for right now, then I think it's great. But we obviously have a little bit more to cover off.
So Robert asked, is it common to negotiate long-term rental properties?
Sorry, say that again?
Is it common to negotiate long-term rental properties, like 12-month rentals?
I have instilled in our lot that every deal is worth negotiating. You've got to go after it. But it comes down to the problem with that is, how long's it been on the market? How good is the property? How attractive is the deal? If you're doing this by yourself, and you're not doing it in an instant, and you're monitoring something over a 3 or 4 month process, process before you make your leap, you're going to start to see an even longer. You're going to start to see, trends emerge and see whether things are rightly priced or not. And you've got to make your own assumption on that. If you're doing this all by yourself, so. Or I will always ask the question. It's in my nature to always ask that question. Always try and do it. We had something not that long ago. We were it was on at 3,750, and we got it for 3,000. How we got it for 3,000 was because we offered the 12 months rent up front, because the client was able to do it. So there's always ways and means and tactics to do things, especially if you can offset risk.
Great, thanks, Nick.
So. Sorry, you want another question, or
there's 3 more questions here? Do you want they're thick and fast. Okay, so this quick one. Lou Mello says, what do you think is the minimum number of days for a research visit to look at areas of the Algarve and housing, either purchase or rental? And I can sort of testify to that, Lou. It's how long is a piece of string? Some people take a long time to make up a choice. Other people, like both Nick and I, just moved straight away because we didn't really have a choice. We just landed where we landed. You landed in Quinto and I landed in Cavoeiro. But yeah, sorry, what are your 2 cents worth, Nick?
No, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to what preparation you've done before. I mean, if only there was a resource where you could look at loads of videos of towns before you before you could
That'd
move
be
there.
amazing, wouldn't it?
It would be, I know, but
We've
like
created this, if you don't know, we've created this massive encyclopedia of videos that we're trying to organize on the website, because on YouTube there are, it's not as easy to see, but yeah, there'll be 50 videos about every single town in the Algarve. So you can spend hours researching.
But I mean, it's really interesting. I did a tour the other day actually with a client, and he had watched everything. So Ramon, big shout out to you on that one. I'm not sure if you're on this, but hey, and he had watched a lot of all the videos. Basically, he's very proud of it, and he even knew details that I didn't even know about some of those videos. But he had done an awful lot of research, and when we were out on the tour. It wasn't just about it was about my knowledge on the ground. He was confident in towns. He'd already identified it. But actually, when it came down to it, I took him to Lule. He hadn't considered Lule, and it wasn't in his scope of stuff. But I thought, you know what? Let's just test him, because I want to try to show different market towns. And he got there and it's like, this is on the list. It's now on the list. It wasn't on my list because I hadn't considered that kind of lifestyle, because it's slightly inland versus on the coast, which has been their initial preference. So, there is, I would say, if you've done a good body of research, you are a proactive person so that you get here. If you're, I would budget half a day. Otherwise, your mind will melt if you're trying to take in every town, for each kind of place. You go to Oleau, have the morning, walk around, get to know it, watch the video beforehand, go and see the bits that you like, have a look at, just have a look at the different styles of property, get your boots on. So, if you took half a day in each town, it just then depends on what your short list of towns is. So, if you were to do 2 weeks intensive, you would be doing a very, very good job, in my opinion.
Great. How easy is it to refinance an existing mortgage today? From Daniel Lloyd.
To refinance an existing mortgage? Excellent question. I haven't personally got experience of that, but people that I know, it's never seemed to be a problem. Like everything, it comes down to what the cost aspect of moving that product, but also your circumstance. If your circumstances have changed and not, we used to have a problem. We used to have a big problem in not being able to equity release and you had to, but now the rules have changed, so you can hold it for 2 years, and then you can refinance and extract cash if you need to, on that angle. If it's just to go, hey, I'm paying 5% and I want to get to 2, I wouldn't say you're going to have too much of a problem, now, if you've been in the, depending on the terms of your mortgage. But get a good mortgage broker, ask the question. They're free to use, and just get out there and run the scenarios.
And if you don't know any, we might know somebody.
For sure. And as I say, this one isn't about that. But if you do want, if you do need anything, of course, we are here to help. But
Okay, so Chad's asking something which is not really related to house prices. Should we keep the rest of these? One quick one. Michael O'Sullivan asks, what is the maximum mortgage term for retirees over age 70? I'm not sure if you
5 years.
know that. 5 years. Okay.
Yeah. So the Portugal gives mortgages up to 75. So for all the US guys and girls out there, it's very different, whereas you could be in, 65, 70 and get a 30-year mortgage. It doesn't work like that here. We are, we are fixed termed in that sense up to the, the oldest applicant in your mortgage, mortgage proposal. There are a couple of banks that will do 80, but obviously with that normally comes probably higher fees and obviously, probably less attractive deals because they can't be quite competitive.
Great. I think we can get to the rest of the questions at the end, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, a couple of other, I mean, obviously, I don't think we've got time to run through all the sort of cost of living things. So, like, being very candid, if there are things that we haven't sort of come across or talked about, by all means, please, send us an email. You know, if that we can, collate all these things and provide answers, and we can send it out to everybody. We've got a weekly email list. That we send out emails, and we could use that to answer a lot of questions and put a fact sheet together if that's helpful. But cars and sort of petrol, I suppose, is an interesting one. We are generally pretty expensive for cars here. In this all comes down to an illegal double taxation, essentially, that the Portuguese have put onto cars, and the EU fine them every year, but the fines are smaller than what they collect, so they carry on doing it. I'm not sure how that is morally in terms of showing citizens what you should do and what you shouldn't, but that is why when you look at car prices here, I base it on the UK, and when I was looking at buying a 4 or 5 thousand pound car, trying to, it was actually quite a good car. Doing that here now, you'd be buying an absolute banger for for that kind of level of money. So it's the way I've looked at it personally is I've gone, look, getting onto the market is going to be harder. It's going to be higher. And I've managed to get there, and I'm in, which means I've got a newer car, and it will be at the higher level, and it will then be circumstantial. You're not buying and then losing massively all over the place. You just the entry point is higher than other countries. But having said that, we're in the EU. You're buying cars from different countries and importing them is a well-trodden practice, and can be done, and is done on a regular basis. And you can be matriculated here and save a lot of money. So a lot of it, again, research. Like any market, any place, there are deals to be had. I had one the other day. A friend of mine sent me through a WhatsApp message saying, "Hey, my friend needs to sell this car. It's probably worth 25 grand, but she wants to sell it for 17 just to get it done." And, I checked out the facts. It wasn't for me, but I did have a look at it myself and thought, actually, you know what? It is true. She's not trying to, just hyperinflate something and get it sold. So, once you're on the ground and your community and your network, things do arise, and, you can take advantage of it. Sort of petrol prices, again, I was looking into some stats because I drive an electric car, so this is kind of a little bit out of my league these days. But actually, we've been pretty flat, over the years. The spikes came around the Ukraine, the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but generally over the last, I pulled some stats from the Portuguese National Institute of Statistics. And 5 years ago, petrol was at 1.7, and it's now at 1.75. Diesel went from 150 to 161, and it kind of went up and down in between those times. So it's not been a sort of staggered, constant growth. And there was a spike in the middle of that. So we're pretty there. We're pretty sort of medium. It doesn't seem to be as aggressive as markets like the UK, where they just heavily tax year on year, petrol. And I think the US is obviously much more attractive, especially if you're a European and you're looking at it, is much, much lower than what we see here.
Just a quick question from Hassan. He says, can you buy a decent second-hand car in Spain or France and bring it to Portugal easily, or loads of paperwork? And generally, yes, there's loads of paperwork, and you'll have to pay a lot of tax when you come into Portugal, even though it's coming from Spain and France. The sort of workaround is that if you have been living in Spain or France for 6 months beforehand, and you're a resident, then you can bring one free of charge, or not free of charge, but free of any taxes.
But I mean, but having said that, we've looked at case studies with a car importer guy, where over a certain engine size, I think he said it was about 1.5, or you're buying a relatively high value, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't matter even if it's a Tesla, right? Sorry, I'm not focusing on electric cars per se, but, in the German
Top
market,
end Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah, in the German market, it's obviously a big brand in Germany. And because of the size of the population and everything else, and they don't have that double taxation, it is still cheaper to buy a higher value, higher engine car in Germany, have it imported, pay the fee and the agent's fee, than it is to buy it in here. So that doesn't work on low level cars, sort of, let's say sub 10 grand. But, if you're in that sort of mid tier market, then yeah, it's really definitely worth doing your homework, because you could probably save a good few thousand. And either you're spending the same money and getting a better car, or, you're actually getting a much better deal.
Great. No more questions for now.
So, I mean, just whipping through things like property taxes. I mean, my property taxes haven't changed in the 7-8 years that I've owned my house. It hasn't changed. I pay €750 a year for my property tax. Like, that's it. It's in me. Home insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Home insurance, again, for me, hasn't changed. I pretty much found, since I've been here, either I've managed to negotiate a decrease in my insurance across the levels, or they stayed the same. I've very rarely personally found increases. But it's a competitive market here. So, if you are faced with an increase, then go back and change it. I mean, again, talking about insurances, car insurance, I was looking at, I got a brand new car, and I was stunned when the invoice, when the insurance quote came back at €750 for a full replacement brand new car if something went wrong for the first 3 years. But actually, when I look at it across the rest of the world, it's pretty unbelievable. And when I talk to my American clients about it, they're like, "Oh wow, it's really quite good." And I was talking to my mum the other day in the UK about it, and she was, she's double, if not triple, that value for her car, which is no different in value to mine. So, we're pretty low in general on insurance. Shop around, of course, but again, use a broker. They're great. They don't cost anything either, and they really will go to town to get you the market, to get the right ones. What else? Key.
Can I just say something quickly? Sorry,
Sure.
there's quite a few questions coming in, and I'm not sure if we're going to have much time for everyone. Hopefully, we can try and match you up with your email addresses, and then try and respond via email to some of your questions. If we don't have enough time, we'll try our best though.
So electricity, again, it's not cheap here. Gas is it's a funny setup here. It's not the norm. It hasn't been the norm to be on the mains gas. You can be, but a lot of people, have just been buying, gas bottles. My father, my parents-in-law, they work off gas bottles. It's pretty cheap, on gas compared to electric. If you want that hassle, I personally don't like gas. I prefer just to have electric from more of a safety issue. That's my own hang up rather than, a Portuguese thing. And I pay, I've got a household of 4 people. I pay somewhere between 150 and €200, depending on how aggressive my wife's being with the radiators and in the winter, and but that doesn't count for firewood. If you're trying to add that in, I probably spend €100 every month or every month and a half on firewood during the winter, largely because it's just a nice heat and we like it. But so again, all in, just for ease of reference for people, not that everybody knows exactly my lifestyle, but for my mortgage, for running my house, for feeding my family from the supermarket, I put away about €2,500 a month, and don't normally go over it. So that doesn't include going out, partying, all that stuff, but it does include internet, phone, that kind of stuff. So if that helps someone with a benchmark, then here. I think we should probably move on from cost of living, because the list I have of stuff is just massive.
It's exorbitant.
It's absolutely bonkers.
Sorry, long.
Looking at Question two: what's actually changing with visas and immigration policies? Um, when this question came up, I cursed Dee, who's sitting in the background, for coming up with it. It's not something I really want to get into in terms of depth, because of it's look, at the end of the day, right now, it's a moving feast.
And it's
We
also
don't
become
know.
highly political, obviously. What's actually changing with visas and immigration policies?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an economic, historian or or anything, but we are. Everyone is seeing globally, certainly across the pond and definitely in Europe, you're seeing, this is sort of move to the right of, hey, it's our country, and I say this especially with the British angle, you're seeing a lot of nationalism and a lot of, anti-immigration, because of poor immigration policies, potentially, as I say, not getting into the politics of it, but, we're seeing that across Europe. So what the recent change in government and this kind of feeling of, sort of, I suppose, a far right, pacifying the far right in this law change with this new government, because it ended up being a bit of a coalition. Um, you know, we have seen, they're looking to extend and the biggest one that's affecting people is extending the path to citizenship from 5 years to 10 years. And the big political one right now is there, are the people in the process going to be grandfathered, on? And right now, what I can say is that it's being moved. It's gone to the president, and the president has three different options. He can approve it, he can veto it, which basically sends it back to the people that wanted it in the first place, which doesn't really kind of make sense because they'll just send it back. Or it goes to the Constitutional Court. And that, given he is a student of the Constitution, or teacher, sorry, of the Constitution, is what the knowing commentators are saying, that's where it's going to go, and it will go there. And what actually the Constitution, this whole new law is saying that the proposal is going completely against the Portuguese constitution of being able to, to be able to sit here as, one day in Portugal eating your breakfast, knowing you're on a pathway for 5 years, and suddenly it being changed. It's completely against the constitution of Portugal. So, the likelihood is, based on that, and if it doesn't, it's going to be quite a big ripple if they change it, across the EU, across Portugal, is that they will essentially say, no, you have to include this law that people are allowed to remain, the people are allowed to stay on that path of that they're on. Now, that, when you're looking at new people who are looking at moving over, again, we talk about this being sort of my opinion and my feelings as a resident here. And please chime in with yours, Nick. Is, my wife has been here for 36 years. She's been on a resident card for a 10-year resident card for the entirety of her time here. She's not become a citizen. She speaks fluent Portuguese. She's more Portuguese than she is English, in that sense. And, we've had absolutely no problems and whatever else. Even with Brexit, I was granted, the status of sort of, I suppose, a pre-Brexiteer, and being able to remain on a 5-year residency. I understand others that, want to come over here and, get a passport for Europe. But I think it comes down to age dependency. I don't see 10 years as being a crazy amount of time to come to a country, if that's the way this law goes. But to enjoy the country as it is, and and use Europe, on your doorstep. Yes, it's annoying if you've been planning and you're 2 years into your planning and all of a sudden there's change. I appreciate that things have changed, and there are other places that you can, other countries that you can get things done a bit quicker, but they're not Portugal. So wrapping all that up, we. Well, the one thing I think I've learned a lot about Portugal, and I can't work out whether I love it or I hate it, is the speed of change. We've had what, 3 or 4, even 4 governments in the last 4 years. It's been insane. You only have to look at the law that they passed about AL licensing, and how that suddenly set the cat amongst the pigeons with everybody. That suddenly, you were buying a property and you were coming here to rent, and you were going to do that and you're going to make your money, and then you couldn't do it. Within a year, it was reversed, and there's a new government came in. So, what's coming in now, will it be set in stone for the long time? Who knows? If it follows that, it could be completely flipped. If the government gets any form of vote of no confidence and it goes back to vote, it seems to happen more frequently than any other government that I've ever seen anywhere. But so never say never. But I'm hoping they do the right thing and allow people to that process, who are on the process, to remain in that time frame. But this is also isn't about anti-immigration. They did want the right immigration. So that's it's not, as I say, we don't want anybody. It's just like, hey, we want it to be done in the right way, and we don't want to see what happened in the UK. The UK is just is crazy. It saddens me to see what's happening there and the amount of immigration, and how it's affecting the country and how it hasn't been handled properly. So in a way, it is good. But obviously, everyone has their personal circumstance right now of wanting to move and how it may affect them. So, it's definitely worth bearing in mind what we're about to move on to, which is the quality of life here now versus 5 years ago, which is question 3.
Before you do that, Chad Crow mentioned right in the beginning, he said, amongst other things, we've been considering the move to Portugal. He was curious about the recent influx of Americans and how the current feeling is. And just want to put this in context. There are about 1.6 million foreigners in Portugal, and there are about 24,000 Americans. So everyone feels that there's like, it might be more. This is like data from a year ago, and it might be more. So what the point I'm trying to make is obviously there's not that many Americans here. There are quite a few Americans on holiday and thinking about it and stuff like that, but there's not a massive influx of Americans living here yet. I mean, have you felt the same, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot from people, I think, because the American accent is quite distinctive, whether that's because of the movies or what. But so people pick up on it quite quickly, and because it's not been the norm. So I think there is an overinflation of oh my God, I've heard more American accents on the ground than ever. That largely will be because now Faro is also and the Algarve is very accessible via a direct flight from New York. That came this in May, and then obviously all the tourists and people who are looking to do their scouting trips are coming in. So, like, in the grand scheme of it, no. In the grand scheme of it, there's more Brits and Irish on the ground here, Germans and Swedish and French than Americans. But circumstance and for whatever reason means they are coming. But there's only a certain amount of housing, so it can't go crazy.
Lots of cranes about building.
There's a lot of cranes, but again, it's more individual villas rather than. And we know the planning system here is so slow that it's it's just not like Berkeley Homes in the UK that's building 4,000 units in one go. It's just not that kind of development. We don't have that scene.
Okay, should we move into the quality of life now versus 5 years ago?
Yeah. Well, look, let's start somewhere, right? And the essence of that's fine. We talk 5 years, 14 years, you're 20, whatever years. The life here hasn't changed in the sense that the sky is still blue for 300 days a year. The proximity to the ocean, wherever you are in the Algarve, is never going to change. The beaches are still beautifully clean. The water is still as nice as it was, apart from the odd bit of seaweed that comes in, but that's normally on the west. So just stick away from the west. And you're fine. So like that propensity to want a lifestyle where you're out and about, getting on a bicycle, going for a walk, enjoying the hills, enjoying the waterfalls, enjoying the mountains, and getting into chasing dinosaur footprints on the west coast to paddle boarding, playing paddle tennis, pickles still on the rise here. That kind of, this country has not changed in that time. That side of it has not changed. What is noticeably changing a little bit is where you saw more of a non-Portuguese cuisine bar kind of environment, the socializing, the going out, the restaurants. you normally saw the non-Portuguese stuff tended to be closer to the tourism areas, and it is now changing a little bit. You're starting to go away. I mean, 5 years ago, if you'd asked any restaurant for a flat white, you just get a galao. You get a milky coffee, a latte, basically.
And a
So
funny
like,
look.
huh?
And a
And a
funny
funny look.
look.
Yeah,
What's a
but
flat
the look
white? Yeah.
drops and they just give you what they want. So unless you were in a relatively nice hotel, they probably wouldn't have a clue what you're talking about. But now you start to see, in my area, I can, and my area being the Lule Conselho, if I was meeting up with someone who was particularly a coffee person and really wanted an artisan style coffee with home roasted beans, then we'd you'd be able to find it within a 10-minute drive. You've seen, one of our, places that we like in Lagos, the everyday cafe, they're brilliant, so you are starting to see what I would have called the London scene, which is only because I was from London, you know, and the way things had changed over the years before I moved to Portugal. It's starting to infiltrate a little bit as people want, are happier to pay a slightly higher price for an artisan coffee that they want.
But it's interesting to see that coffee culture and the restaurant culture start in Lisbon and then go to Porto, and then now it's slowly dripping down to the Algarve as well, which has started off in Lagos, coming to Faro, a bit in Lule. So it's permeating through. But
and
we
we and we'll
still,
always and we'll always be slower than anywhere else, and that's why we have this sort of, I suppose, protectionism, is because we're not Lisbon's got what, 5 million people. That's half the population of Portugal in that greater Lisbon
2.9.
area.
Yeah.
So these places are always going to rise where the denser populations are. But now, as I say, you're starting to see it down here a lot more because you've got that hint of tourism. You've got, an age demographic. So, that has changed. And that, if you talk about quality of life, from a social and personal level, when I moved here, the age profile was kind of insane. There was no one I was in my 30s when I moved here. I was hanging around with my wife's friends. Famously, actually, I mean, you might chuckle on this, and I think I have told you this story, Nick. But the reason why Nick and I met was we were basically set up on a mandate. Well, I was, because they were like, some mutual friends of ours were like, "Hey, we know this guy called Nick, and he's great. You should meet him." This is before you were doing your paddle, or just at the time you were doing your paddle boarding, and way before this. And I was like, I don't need another friend. I go back to London for that. And we, our friends, introduced us, and as they say, the rest is history. It's been beautiful ever since. But
Thing of
you know,
beauty.
it's and I was finding myself playing tennis with 85-year-olds on a tennis court that, and I was sort of like, what am I doing? I've left all my mates in London and I'm here. But don't get me wrong, they were wonderful people and much better tennis players than I am. But it was not what I had envisaged for myself. Move on 14 years, and it's amazing to see the different groups of people in, I obviously, my focus is on the sort of, I suppose, the 30 to 40 young family range, because that's where I'm sit. But it's amazing to see how many young families are out here now. Those that have moved, the digital nomads, the NHR lot, the people that have just moved. I mean, a friend of mine from school just randomly moved over and got in touch with me. And it's great. It's great to see that. So for my quality of life of leaving where I was to finding, a group of people that I, adore and love and call my family as well, that has improved drastically over that. So for people who are moving here now, you have that accelerated already.
Yeah, and I can second that as well. I mean, over the last 20 years, we've seen a recent influx of young families and younger people, which makes, it sort of measures the Algarve out a bit more. Instead of not just retirees as foreigners, there's a whole range of different ages, and it's more, it's exciting for younger people as well. And there's a lot of, new businesses starting up because foreigners come here and start their new businesses. And it's added a lot to the vitality of the place. It really has.
And I mean, we go back to dramatic scenes, right? Well, before we go to that, sticking to the changes, yes, we talked about these restaurants and flat white joints creeping in. And we were only sat down with Claire, who joined us recently, and she was like, oh my God, coming to this place is like being back in Cape Town. So there's quite a lot of reassurance as well for people when they're going to restaurants. I mean, Casa Vostra in Almondsale has been around for a long time, and that's one of our favorite places to go. And it's been ahead of its time here, in terms of its aesthetic and the food service and what it is. But that's not to say I absolutely love grumpy Portuguese waiters. You only have to love a Marufo's chicken in Quartera, where they never break a smile. The service is horrendous in many ways, but actually the food is amazing. They churn out chicken like you wouldn't believe. It's cheap. It's plastic tables, and it's got that sort of cheap paper cloths on it. But the beer is cold, and the chicken is great, and the chips are fabulous, and they're an institution, and it just rolls on. So that quality of life, if you're looking for a expensive restaurant or a beachside restaurant to a local Portuguese, hasn't changed in all this time. And I'm not seeing any erosion of Portugal in the Algarve. Certainly from that dining perspective, it's still there. You can still get what you want and where you want to go. But the interesting things, like looking at the last 5 years, the things that have kind of, I suppose, impacted quality of life here, impacted everybody. Certainly COVID, was obviously a big change in that time period. But what a place to be locked down if you ever get locked down again, which I'm sure will never happen. But, it's an amazing place to be, having to get out. At least when I got out, it was in sunshine. If I'd been in the UK, it would have been into the rain, and that would have been miserable. At least, getting out and taking my dogs for a walk, it was blue skies and nice weather. But yeah, probably. But then larger than those two was the arrival of my kids. So yeah, the quality of life has changed dramatically in the last 5 years because of their arrival, in a wonderful way, obviously. But yeah.
Can I just jump in with a quick question?
Yeah.
Before we get to the next section. So John B asked, would you say quality of civic services like police, fire, etc. is good, bad, trending up or down? Is law enforcement viewed by residents as a positive community thing to protect and serve, or has it become negative like the US? Very subjective, I realize, but what's the feeling? And I've just come from the GNR station down the road, and they're just fantastic people. I've always seen them as to protect and serve, and sometimes when they stop you on the road, they've got these sort of Gestapo-looking hats, and it looks very, very scary. But they always salute you, and they call you, like, they speak to you very politely. I don't know. That's been my experience. I don't feel like they're very aggressive. How do you feel, Nick?
Do it's kind of strange. When I first moved here, I kind of came with the auspices of the GNR, being like, you don't mess with them, right? There's this sort of real respect, because they had the kind of unspoken authority where they're not going to take any BS. It's quite a hard line. And I actually, as a person, I like that, because, there's too often now you see, obviously I don't want a police state where they're, where they're taking the piss and hurting people and doing things above and beyond. But, where you can't even sit, in the UK, there is no respect for policemen at all in any way, shape or form. There's nothing. And I was of that opinion until, and I still am personally, but I hear a lot more on the ground that the GNR are finding it harder and harder to be the police that they were, because of they're being pulled up on, X, Y, and Z, and being either too aggressive in a situation, or and it's becoming this sort of the same culture that crept into the UK. I can't really talk about the US in policing senses, but and I'm personally disappointed to hear that. I kind of liked from my own person thinking that there was this sort of, excuse my language here, but no shit attitude, where the people respected and therefore did it. So I've not seen a change on the ground personally, but I just hear this when I've raised my viewpoint on it. Some Portuguese, everybody seems to be friends with someone from the GNR, have sort of said yes, things are sort of changing on that basis.
And the firemen
brigade.
Awesome.
Yeah, they're
just amazing. Everybody sort of brings together and donates and collects and gives, because a lot of it is volunteer service. So we all get together whenever there's a big fire. Everyone gets together, donates, and rugs and food and water and everything. So I think there's a very, very much a community spirit around firefighters.
The interesting one of the interesting points I get, and we get a lot when we're taking people around, is and Ramon, who I mentioned earlier, was just like, wow, I haven't seen one police car since the whole time I've been driving around. And that's not because they're not present. It's just they don't operate at the scale they do, stateside. Is very different. And actually it wasn't just the seeing, it was the hearing. They were almost kind of not alarmed, but kind of like, oh my Lord, I can't hear a siren. I haven't heard a siren, which is amazing. And she's right. Like, okay, we're
It's
not a
generally
big city
ambulances.
here, but
Yeah.
you don't hear it. You really don't hear it. It's not like it's whirring to something all the time.
And also, many of our clients have come, from the US, and a lot of them are petrified of the police. And we're like, well, why? Are you okay? And, saying it's not like that here. It's okay. You know what I mean? You can relax. People are here to protect you. It's
Yeah.
generally, it's a very different thing if what they're saying is true about their experiences in America. I mean, I'm sure they are.
So just Catherine, I can see your comment there about sort of community, and guess that goes back to quality of life. Of what I was trying to say earlier is, yes, I understand it can be incredibly daunting moving to a new place. You know, I mean, I only had it the other day. I was sat at a table with a bunch of Portuguese people, and I feel like a heathen sometimes because I don't converse fluently in Portuguese, and I've got a couple of people trying my best to keep me included. But as nights go on, and as a few drinks go, they obviously slip back into it, and that was my experience right at the beginning of my time here, and probably then led me to being more and more around English speaking people or English people, which is, I'm sad to say, in a way, but it becomes reality. Is it hard and trying to find that community? Look, like anything, it's I say this to all our clients, is like, hey, just get out there. You've got to do a year or 2 years worth of never saying no to anything, because you just don't know. And it might be, and it's horrible to say, but the couple that are inviting you might not be your cup of tea, but the people that they might invite as well might be. And suddenly, sadly, you've got to kiss a few frogs to get through to the the right kind of community. And signing up, getting involved, there's lots of things that happen, and if they don't happen, put them on. I went to a thing called Trunk or Treat the other day, which an American lady who moved over here put on, because here we don't have the sort of scale of close proximity communities to be able to go door to door with your kids and knock on and do trick or treating, and there was 80 cars in the car park at the Algarve Stadium, all dressed up as Halloween. And, there was probably then over 200 people there. And that was an amazing moment for community. And everybody was chatting and everybody was talking all through one lady's inspirational idea. And, they happen throughout the year here. And
there's no shortage of those events, and there's on Facebook and WhatsApp, and there's tons of groups and everything. And if you look out, you can find many, many, many different communities. There's this friend of mine, Kat, she does a walk and talk every single week, and there's like 20, 30 foreigners all going for walk, and Portuguese people as well, which is wonderful, all going for hikes all around different places in the Algarve. So, there's, like you mentioned, Trunk and Treat, there's walks, there's high tech sort of groups who talk about, sort of crypto stuff and whatever you want. There's tons of community available here. You just, as you said, you've got to go out and look for it.
yeah, and I mean, for example, when we put on something every month that we have put together to help people moving in, people that live here, and try to help integrate and get people to meet and and get involved and converse. And we are just one of, as Nick says, multiple places in different regions across the Algarve. But as I say, like, sometimes if you're lacking, we've got a client that was into American swing, American smooth dancing, and she would travel from Salema on the west coast to Albufeira, twice weekly to do the class. And there where she's finding like-minded people, and then her crowd, then and she's found a community there. Any more questions before we
No, there's lots more questions, but we just can't get to them. I think we've got to finish this first and then maybe get to the questions if we have time. We have as much time, though. We don't have a limit.
Yeah. So, number 4, who Portugal still makes sense for, and in brackets, who might want to look elsewhere. I mean, I kind of looked at this earlier, and I just sort of suppose puts down some challenging questions that I would be asking myself if I was looking to make this move. I guess it's one, do you want an adventure? You know, 2, do you want a healthy lifestyle where the food tastes as it should? And that sounds a bit weird, but I can't tell you the number of comments I get from clients stateside that come here and go, I can't believe the taste of the fish or the taste of the tomatoes. They actually taste like they should. It's alien to me. I don't know that. I don't get that. I've never had that issue with produce. I've always had it. So, things like that are real. Do you want a different pace of life? Let's not shirk it. It is different here. We're not big cities. We haven't got that big city vibe. Life doesn't move at 1,000,000 miles an hour here. And it's one of the hardest adjustments I think our clients, who, even though they want it, make, in that the bureaucracy is much slower. Response time are much slower. People it's not a snap culture. Sorry.
Yeah, and the only saving grace is, you can pop up to Lisbon in 2.5 hours drive, like we do just about every month. We go up because we've got family there. You can take a flight to London in 2.5 hours, 3 hours, and as with most European capitals, so you can get out, in and out easily. Seville's just down the road, so you can grab that big city life when you need a dose of it.
Yeah, I mean, and you missed Seville off that. I mean, Seville's closer than Lisbon.
I didn't miss it, actually.
Did you not? I didn't hear it then. Sorry.
That's okay.
But that's only 2 hours away, and like it's an amazing place to be, to explore. So if you want that, if you want a European odyssey in your life journey, then absolutely, this is, it's a great place to ground yourself, and it really, really, I mean, just have a look at do some research on Faro Airport and the destinations it flies to. I mean, you can for €14 you can hop for half the year over to Marrakesh and and get into the African continent for such a cheap amount of money. It's awesome. So yeah, different pace of life. So with that pace of life, change has to become a change in you. If you're coming from a very high, energetic, society, culture, city, that has to change, and expectations have to change, and you have to go through it. It doesn't mean to say you have to be inefficient. It may mean you get a bit wound up. I've been here 14 years, and I still get wound up about certain things, but equally, I get wound up about it, and then I'm playing on the beach with my kids in the afternoon. So, there's yin and yang with everything, right? I have a point about where I want my kids to grow up to. If you're looking to move here and bringing your kids with you, I would not want to be bringing my kids up in the UK now. And I hate that I say that, but I look at where we are. I look at the people that are around, the culture, the feeling on the ground, the lack of crime, the whole shebang. It's still unbelievable. I pinch myself. As I said right at the beginning, I never planned this. This is a wonderful accident for me, and I couldn't be happier, even though I left what I thought was the greatest city in the world, at the time. There's an element to, there's a lot of people's opinion that taxation is higher, whether that's because of, stateside, etc., and then the Portuguese tax system here, but there is the trade-off. Look at the cost of living, the actual changing cost of living, the drop in insurance levels, the price of food, people ask me, oh, why, do you ever go on holiday? I was like, well, I don't really, because I feel like it's not like I feel like I'm on holidays and I'm not doing anything, but I don't have that depressed feeling of having to pay a lot of money to go to the most unbelievably spectacular place, because I live in this famous spectacular place. So, where for some people, depending on your income and your pension and your financial setup, you might end up paying a bit more taxation. But do the mathematics, look at the cost offset, and then if there is a differential, to say what's better for me, my health, life, being in the sunshine all that time, just take time and use it. Come here on holiday, and look at it. Also, it's a sensible place to invest in housing, as I said earlier. Right now, okay, who knows if there's going to be a bubble, but we haven't a dip, sorry, but we haven't had one for a long time. So, you may be paying a lot more, or getting a lot less for your money than you were back home in, a Colorado ranch for the same money as an oleao flat. But, the growth in that money, if you did ever have to return, would sort of hopefully, see you doing well. On the currency side, same kind of thing. We're seeing such good growth here that maybe, that hit in the early days offsets, but the currency changes. So, that will change. Sorry, Nick, were you trying to
No, it's fine.
interject
You
it?
want to do the last item, then I want to get to some of the questions.
Um,
So,
yeah,
yes, there
and
was one actually. I wanted to jump in quickly. So
yeah,
Ed Ahern says, maybe a stupid question, but you chased a girl to Portugal. Is she now your wife?
I did get her. I did get her.
Well
So,
done, man. Well
yeah,
done. She's a lovely person.
I probably wouldn't be here if that was the case. Not because I don't love it or care about it, but yeah, she was the reason why I'm here. And now I have many other reasons to be here: children, job, friends, lifestyle, and now I would never trade what I have here lifestyle wise, because I could not afford to give my kids that anywhere else in the world.
And Hassan asked, long term, does it feel like it'll be still great in 20 to 30 years? There's no ways we can look 20 to 30 years into the future. I'd love to say yes, because I feel very optimistic, and I've been here for 20 years and I've loved every minute of it. So hopefully another 20 will be fine. I don't see, yeah, it's very, very difficult to say. I mean, AI could wipe us off the planet in 5 years. So who knows?
But yeah, I mean, but yes, but we haven't. I don't think we've got the things that can
Sorry, thanks,
expose.
Justin and Kimberly. Nice to see you
Um,
guys.
thanks, guys. I don't think we don't have access to the things that can change it so dramatically, like big cities. We're still a tourism culture. We don't have big industry and thousands of office blocks being built up, and and that kind of stuff. So I maybe naive of me, but I knew this place a long time ago. And yes, if you'd ask someone who saw this place in the 1980s or 70s, they'd be like, oh my Lord. I mean, okay, that was 50 years ago. But, there's been an enormous amount of change there. I don't think the pace of change for me in 14 years has been dramatic at all.
Yeah.
So then you might be like, okay, well, look, Portugal might not be for you if you're chasing a European passport within 6 years, like it was before. If if that sticks and that law changes, then that is fact. There's nothing anyone could do about that. But again, I urge you, look at the bigger picture. Look at the strength of the economy here, versus other countries in Europe. Our inflation, as I say, is on par with Europe as a general. We are a great investment, for housing, and we. I don't know. I feel safe here, whereas I think the volatility of and this is my general reading rather than a full understanding. But I would feel if I was wanting to move and I was looking at Greece and Italy because of the lifestyle that they might offer in terms of weather and everything else, they feel much more volatile than Portugal. And I have my concerns, when Portugal went through, through its problems, but I do not feel it now.
Just quickly, Cornelia said, we've been wintering here the last 5 years and love it. We wonder what the Algarve feels like in the summer regarding tourism density, etc. We heard, like, for example, she says, we heard that you have to get in line in order to get into the supermarket, etc. And for my personal thing, I mean, it depends, obviously it depends where you are. Right down on the coast, in Lagos, for example, or Villa Moura in August, it's pretty crazy, yes. And when you're trying to get to the beach, it'll be difficult to park. But it's nothing like Lisbon, where you can't actually even park in the beach. So if you live here and you know the ways around these, it's generally, to be honest, I don't think it's actually that bad. It's just the month of August when the whole of Portugal comes down as well, which contributes to all the foreign tourists as well. So then you've got like Lisbon and Porto all coming down to the Algarve, and that does make it really, really busy in August. But like I said, you can find your way around it. There are definitely, I know, everywhere to go. That there's hardly anybody in summer.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, Nick. I mean, I think tourism is really over, and the concern around it is really overly done. fine, I get it. If you come for your experience week in your scouting tour and you turn up in Albufeira on the strip in the middle of August, you're going to have the worst opinion of the Algarve ever, because it's just drunk Brits, slobbering their way around the place, and that is not the tourism market here. But equally, let's be real, the Algarve exists because of tourism, right? So for 10 weeks of the year, I have this, and this is my attitude. I put up with it, any little nuance that might affect my life, because that is what's bringing prosperity to this area and this region. And for the 9 months of the year or more, we have this place to ourselves somewhat. The beach near me. Yeah, I know when it's busy because at 10:30 in the morning, in an August, the 468 spaces are empty, are gone. Whereas if I see 10 tick over now, I'd be sort of like, hang on, is someone having an event? So, you have to trade off the chaos with it, but you learn your way, you learn the supermarkets that are quieter, and you know what, you put up with it. But the only thing I have to do, which annoys me, is book a restaurant in the summer, and I live in quite a touristy place, so you know
And that's only happened in the last couple of years, that booking a restaurant thing. It's
well, you know what, I think what's happened on that fact is that people, and quite rightly, when they're that busy, they don't want to lose out on business. And if you don't turn up for a table, so now what I've seen a lot of is people having to book tables, but also pay a deposit just in case, which I hate generally as a thing, but I completely understand it from a business perspective, that if you decide not to turn up and then suddenly there's a table for 25 that is now empty, that's a big void for these people in the busiest
yeah,
time.
massive. Another point about parking. Hassan mentions parking, and he says parking in the Algarve is amazing and liberated compared to London. Makes life so much easier. London is now nuts for parking. And sure, I mean, it is easier to park in the Algarve, but there are sort of provisos there, or caveats. Like in the middle of Lorley, it's really, really difficult to find a park. You might have to, sort of park and walk for a little bit, but obviously nothing like London. Sometimes in the middle of summer, when you go down to the beach after 9 o'clock in the morning, it's difficult to get parking. So you have to go early if you want to go for that early morning walk. So like I said, there are ways around it. You know what I mean? There are ways around it. You just got to know the flow of people. I feel bad.
Yeah.
There's so many questions here that we can't really answer. I mean,
Well,
we don't have time.
there was one. I mean, look, we will copy them. If I mean, I'm say this. I believe we can probably copy these and add them to a sheet, and we'll
Decent you
try and
can.
put together some answers for those that we haven't been able to get to, because as I say, there is a lot, and we would definitely have answers to them. I just know there was one. Going back to, we kind of covered it off, pre the event, from Juan Rodriguez, who basically said that the euro and dollar conversion has floored me and blown away, and I can't justify the loss that would incur, with the whole deal move, house purchase is said and done. But I mean, absolutely, I understand, but currency, currency does move and it changes, and it sometimes life is a little bit of a gamble, right? And you look at it and go, well, what's the market going to be like when I'm going the other way? But house prices are going up. So yes, there is a chance that you maybe, if you had to go back to the US, you get hammered on the way back, versus the way in, and the property market might go wrong for you while you're here. No one can second guess that. But, if you're getting good years of growth in your property, and, and at the same time, maybe actually, on another angle, actually renting a place here and leaving your money, in the US, say, earning 6% interest, and using that rather than, and then you're not losing out any money. There are ways of doing it, and trying to offset that loss, and then just being a bit smarter with the currency movements, and trying to buy in advance and smooth out your buy process. Always worth, again, speaking to currency brokers to try and put together a strategy on that, so to be not left, hanging, should there be any big changes.
Okay, should we do some more of those questions?
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy to answer as many questions as we can right now, if everybody else is. We've still got 49 people hanging on, so we haven't put everyone to sleep.
Yeah. And thanks to all of you guys hanging in there. So if you, well, I'm not sure if we've actually mentioned some of these questions. What does the Algarve feel like in the summers in terms of tourist density? That's from Cornelia. We've sort of dealt with that, I think. Oh yeah, here's a good one from Daniel Lloyd. Do retail property sales agents charge a standard rate or fee? What is the range of rates?
I've said it again, a retail property agent.
Like a real estate agent. Do they charge a standard rate or a fee? And they generally, yes, they charge 5%. What is the range of rates? But you go
For
ahead. You're the
for
professional.
selling out, yeah. I mean, typically it's between 4 and 5%, depending. On agency, there are some that are, hey, I think there are others that some charge, 6%, but include legal fees involved in that. So yeah, majority of those guys who are representing, who are listing the property, will charge those sort of fees. Buying agents like us, generally share the fee from that side. We as a company charge a small search fee, which is really more just to check people are actually focused on what they're doing and they're not just sort of wanting to fly in, see a load of properties and kind of not waste our time, but waste our time. So it's a little bit of a little sense check. We're here to help everybody, but sometimes we've got to just check on cost, but our time as well.
Okay, Jennifer Aldred asked, is there any news or expectations for the IMT rise for foreign buyers? I heard end of November for budget changes. I think that's packeted into the Mais Habite Sao program, so that's also still under debate at Parliament, right?
Yeah,
So
I think there's an awful lot that's still got to have to come out. But we're monitoring it with our lawyers. And as soon as we get stuff, we'll put some stuff out there. And I just, as a sort of general caveat, like just be really careful with sort of sensationalist videos that do pop up and pop out just to get a rise out of things and focus on the wrong facts. I mean, it happens, and I understand why, but just there's so much sort of drama that sort of gets entered into by the government. I'm not saying it's not unfounded, but the facts still take a while to sort of permeate and actually become reality. So it's definitely worth holding on till the actual stuff is really out there, and then it can be focused on.
And talking about that drama, Farcam asks, have you seen any changes in the behavior of the foreigners or expats who have moved here and feel that they can behave in any disrespectful way that they want to, just because they have money? I've noticed a tangible number of bad behavior towards Portuguese in recent years. My response to that is, I've never seen that. I've never seen that at all. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I think a lot of that stuff happens online, and it's more the other way around. It's more, sort of Portuguese disrespecting foreigners. I don't know. It's a bit of an awkward question, this, isn't it?
It's I mean, sort of answer, the only stuff you see on the ground is drunk tourists. They're the ones that become more obnoxious, but they're not the ones living here. You know, like anything, love thy neighbor, hate thy neighbor. There's always scenarios if you get a bad neighbor and they're pretty bulky, it doesn't matter where they're from, things will happen, and it can affect things. But generally speaking, I have never had let's say, an anti me being here sentiment thrown against me, and being
But
told
the
to go
question
back.
was the other way around.
Oh yeah, or vice versa. No, sorry. And I also haven't seen disrespectful people at all in any way, shape, or form. You know,
I'm sure there are some.
Of course. I think where you'll find, if it's going to happen, it happens when bureaucracy has got to a point of completely winding up that person, and they have been waiting for paperwork, and they're not perhaps not getting the answer from the lawyer or the representative, and it just becomes this sort of bit of a slagging match because they're just fed up with the lack of, say, professionalism, but generally it's not their fault. They just have no update, and constant saying I haven't got an update is, in some people's mind, not acceptable. But that's just, it sadly is a reality sometimes.
Okay, there's another Nick in the audience, Nick Velisarides. He says, can you explain acronyms when you use them? What is IMT?
It's property purchase tax, basically. It is
So
when you're buying a, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I shouldn't interrupt.
No, interrupt.
Okay, so just basically, there's two taxes when I mean there's quite a few taxes, but when there's two major taxes when you buy a house. One is the initial tax, which is the IMT, and the second is the IMI, which happens every single year. It's almost like rates. Okay, and I'm sure you can add to that.
Yeah. Um, no, that's spot on. Basically.
Great. I have
Um,
now. Frank says he has two dogs, Rhodesian Ridgebacks, which are awesome dogs. I love those dogs, man. What's it like in the Algarve to walk the dogs on the beach in the morning? Are they welcome in restaurants, etc.?
quick answer. Always depends on the restaurant and beach. I have beaches near me. Most mornings I walk up my dogs on. I mean, they do not take the signs down saying don't walk your dogs on the beach throughout the whole year. But the kind of unspoken on the ground kind of sentiment is, um, obviously if your dog does something on the beach, you're supposed to pick it up. But also, there's not really anyone on the beach for 9 months of the year, so you're not offending anybody. And typically speaking, it's the lifeguards that are going to tell you to leave the beach if you bring your dog down. They're the ones that police it basically during the summer. Um,
And during the
so
summer, sorry, there's the bathing season, which is a legal sort of season, and it changes every year. The dates change depending on the beach, strangely enough. But so when the lifeguards are there, that's considered bathing season. And generally, dogs are not allowed on most beaches, just about all beaches in the bathing season. But most people turn a blind eye to that. And you go you walk your dogs early in the morning. It's no big deal. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nick. In the UK, it's generally much more dog culture, and people will be welcome dogs in cafes and things. Here, not as much, but it's starting to change.
yeah, I mean, I've seen a big change. The beach restaurants because they tend to be outside. People have been a little bit more relaxed about it. Um, you know, I was at a restaurant the other day and I just saw the sign saying no dogs allowed, but they were fine with them being outside, and so as long as the weather's okay, then it's been fine. So some of them take attitudes that don't want them inside. Some are absolutely fine with it, but just you get to know you get to know the restaurants as and when you go around them. But I'd say generally at the moment in my area, I would lean 80% towards dogs being allowed.
Here's a great question. DK says, how complicated and long would it take to find a plot of open land to build either an imported prefab or partial shipping container-like home with local crews and local construction materials?
Would you like to answer that one, Nicholas?
No, it's like we've been trying to do that for a while now, and we actually making quite a few videos eventually on that subject. I would love to make a whole series of videos all about building and stuff in the Algarve, because it's pardon my French, it's a shit show. It's unbelievably difficult, and there's so many
Well,
convoluted legal issues. And
I'll give you a real world experience. I'm trying to buy a piece of land right now, and I had a topographic survey done of the land prior to purchasing it to just move ahead with what I might be able to do on building. And what it came back was that it was 800 square meters smaller, and the ruin was half the size than what was actually legally on the paperwork. Now, I'm tearing what little hair I have out to understand, hang on, where's my risk? A lot of this comes down to measurements perhaps that were done in the 1930s for this particular example, when measurement tools were different. And this is the spiel I'm getting from kind of everyone. But actually, what I've managed to dug up, this is not a joke, I was in the office of the lawyer about to sign the CPCV. But because of the way they had put the tax, the value ratings on the two different articles of land, one urban, one rustic, I decided to challenge that and walk away from the moment. Not to say I didn't want to buy it, but just change the paperwork and I'll come back. What's actually then transpired is all this discrepancy in the land. But the biggest thing that's come out of this, and this probably goes some way to answer your question, is that to be able to submit the planning permission now, I would need to have the changes updated with the land registry. But that also means my new neighbors, would need to be informed to make sure there's no challenges to it. And I could not submit the planning until I had that. Now, one of the worst parts of this country is that trying to find your neighbors who just have 3 letters. There is no database that you can kind of just go and contact them, which is good for privacy. But equally, if you don't know your neighbor, you have to find these people somehow and
And some of
get
them
them to
have
sign off on it.
left the country, and their
Yeah,
parents used
I
to
mean,
live there. They've gone to France, and they've got 17 kids, and they've died and left it to their kids, and they're scattered all around the world. And so it does get really, really complex. Just a little thing. The land I was sold, that we're living on right here, right now, I was told it was 5,000 square meters, and I believed the guy because I didn't need any more land, and we had enough land. When in 2018 or so we had to demarcate our land due to the local laws, it said, well, you've got 3,600 square meters. I was like, oh, okay. I kind of lost a few thousand square meters there, but I didn't need it. It's just a hassle to maintain. So why not? But still, it's just, there's lots and lots and lots and lots of little variables that happen here.
But just, yeah, on that point, I guess my point there was it's an open-ended. If you're buying a plot of land like I'm looking at, I'm in no rush with this thing. If it takes 4 years to find them, it takes 4 years to find them. But if you are investing a large lump of money that is your thing and you need to live in that place as quickly as possible, then you need to be finding a plot of land that is, in an urban zone that is completely, has all the right, measurements on it. And you need to be able to move to planning very quickly. But even still, that's going to, even if it all works well, you're probably sitting between 12 to 18 months and, before you get your planning. And then also you've then got the build time, which could be the
And
same
then
again.
don't think just because you're building a prefab or a partial shipping container that it's going to be any faster, because that's a habitable place. So you still have to get a habitation license. So they're not going to treat it any differently. There were lots of talk about that years ago, whether if you could pick it up and move it, or if it had wheels on it and stuff. And the problem as well is that there's different laws in different councils. So the Algarve's divided up into 16 different councils. So yeah, it's you got to do a lot of work. Got to get some good lawyers on board, and yeah, just sort of take all your hair out before you start. Great.
Perfect. Anything more?
Yeah, I think there's. I know we've missed a couple of questions, and I really apologize for that. Hopefully, we can get back to you. And then, but one. Yeah, I think we should call it a day now. We'd love to do more of these. I think it's been really good fun, this, and maybe we can try and do a whole like Q&A section beforehand and have a list. But it's been really, really amazing listening to all your guys' questions, and thank you, thanks Ed, appreciate that. Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate you watching. And Neil Rasmussen, they were saying thank you. That's lovely.
I want to add to this before we go. We did have a poll that ran. As you came in, you got asked about, do you think Portugal is still worth the move? Yes or no? And it's quite a unanimous 81% yes. So, which is lovely to hear. I 100% attest to that. Not just because, I say this with all sincerity, I certainly wouldn't want to be in the UK versus here. Now, I've traveled, but I just don't make those moves. But I would not be leaving from here because it works. It's just a beautiful place.
Yeah, excellent. I just want to say thank you to all you guys: Caesar, Frank, Lou Mello, Chad Crow, David Moore, Hassan, Esme, Cornelia, and John B, and all the rest of you. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be here for a good few years, maybe forever. And yeah, we love Portugal. Hope you do too.